Hello and welcome to Hacking Health. My name is Waylon Gomez. I'm your host, and I'm a holistic trauma coach who decided that there was way too much myth and mystery around how to truly heal from trauma, not only in the scientific community, but also in the spiritual community. So I created Hacking Health as a podcast that merges together spirituality and science to better the lives of our listeners. This podcast is for you if you're someone who is struggling to overcome their mental health hurdles. Or if you're someone who really loves science and understanding how things work. It's even for you if you're someone who's on a spiritual path that loves understanding the bigger picture of things through an esoteric and philosophical lens. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell. That way you don't miss a single episode. And let's dive right in. For you, did you find that as you were growing up, that there were certain things that came about in your own personal experience? I know that we've talked about you growing up homosexual. And how was that received, knowing that so many of these ideas can be kind of demonized?
I have a unique experience with that because I have just starting off like from the parental perspective, I knew that I was queer in some capacity. And I came out to my mother first and then my father, and both of them took it perfectly fine. Like, they were cool with it. There were tears, but not like, oh no, how terrible. It was like, I'm glad that you're able to like come to me and have these conversations. And my dad didn't care.
Yeah.
He's chill with it. And I mean, it went as probably, I'm really lucky because it went as good as it possibly could have gone. I'm very grateful, especially for having such a religious upbringing. Not a lot of people have that experience. However, when it comes to being in the church, I never told anybody in the church. Nobody knows. Nobody knows that the girls that I would bring to church, I was dating. They were just my friends. And I told them, not the people in the church, but I told these girls that I was dating at the time. We were, I don't know, like anywhere between like 16 and 18 years old. And I was like, listen, they don't know. They don't know, and they're not going to know.
Right.
I'm out in day-to-day life, but in this space, I am not.
Yeah.
And that was always respected by everybody that I was dating. You are the only person that anybody knows that I've dated.
Right.
You are like, everyone thinks that I've just never dated anybody before that, and but yeah, a big part of my experience with religion is if I felt it was in a controlled and safe enough environment to question things, I would question things. But on day to day, I kind of just went along with it and portrayed the roles that I was supposed to portray. So, for instance, keeping those aspects of my identity in myself, of being queer. Did not express that in those spaces because I feared what could happen. It's one of those situations where a lot of individuals who are queer, who are growing up in religious areas, they're told, you should wait until you're 18. In certain situations, people are told, don't come out until you are 18, you are independent, or even till you're 22 and you're out of college if your parents are helping to pay for your education. You want to make sure that you are financially independent, that you're able to, you have a place to live, that you have a structure of people that you love and trust and that will be there for you. And you don't want to come out before that because it could have very negative effects on you if you get cut off from your only source of food, safety, shelter, so on and so forth. Not the case for me. Again, I'm very lucky. I had very welcoming, wonderful parents, and they were like, it's fine. Even though I was terrified that something else might happen, because you never know. Like, you literally never know. But when I was in church, I never ever told anybody because I figured that would be the response. Because that's sort of like the collective conscious understanding within religion and within especially Christianity.
And that brings up an interesting point when you're talking about that whole idea of like just the cultural connotation within religion and within Christianity. How did it feel for you after you had come out with going to church? Did you find that there was any religious guilt or anything else that kind of came? I know, right? But I think it's important to talk about just because this is something that church does create for a lot of people. And even if they can be out in other places in their life, I mean, I know I've heard people who literally say, I stepped into a church, and because I was gay, I figured I would burst into flames. And the fact that a space can create that kind of guilt within us is kind of terrifying when I think about it. So
it's real. Christian guilt is a real thing. And I'm sure that that's an aspect for every religion, not just Christianity.
oh yeah,
Any group of people that hold a strong, conscious, collective belief, when there's anything that is outside of that accepted sphere, there's always going to be a sense of isolation. There's always going to be this feeling of I have this deep, dark secret that keeps me isolated from everybody else, and I need to maintain that aspect of being a part of this group, and so I'm going to isolate that aspect of myself and pretend that it doesn't exist, or feel great deals of shame and guilt that it does exist, and hope that by guilting it and shaming it away, I'm doing the right thing. No, guilt is a really, really big aspect of religion. Period.
and
And it's definitely like, for sure, I've had a lot of conversations with other queer folks that have said, that very same thing of, I can't walk into a religious space. I feel extremely uncomfortable. I feel extremely unwelcomed. And I'm not here to push any ideology on anybody, and I'm not here to say like, oh, your beliefs are wrong because this and that. I do think that there's, human decency, and we should treat people like people, no matter what your beliefs are. And then I could go into a whole rhetoric around how the word homosexuality or gay was never put in the Bible until the 1940s. You can look it up, and all of that, that it was changed for political purposes, not religious purposes, and that the original, thou shalt not lie with a man as he should with a woman. It was originally thou shalt not lie with a child. Talking about, blanking on the word right now, pedophilia, not homosexuality. And there's
Ironic.
there are all sorts of things within biblical texts that have been skewed and changed for power, politics, because a lot of religions are born both out of a deep spiritual connection, but I don't think anybody who pretends that religion, or anybody who chooses to be ignorant to the fact that an aspect of organized religion is a structure to keep society running and functioning, and is a governmental structure naturally, I think you can't isolate that one from the other. I think
I agree.
They're inherently combined, and to ignore that is to just be ignorant, like willfully ignorant. So there's a lot of complexity when it comes to talking about the moral efficacy of certain beliefs, certain structures, what somebody shouldn't do. That's why I'm more of this belief that everybody has their own personal and private relationship with God, Spirit, universe, Allah, Yahweh, whatever your name for it is. And I think that everybody has that moral compass within themselves as it is given by God, whatever your belief is surrounding that. And I think all of them are valid, and I think we're all just human beings trying to do our best to understand the world from a clearer perspective. And when we start to say, my belief is right and yours is wrong, that's where I get frustrated. That's where I get upset, because it makes people feel isolated. It brings about great levels of guilt and shame. Right. And that is the antithesis to what the origination of Christianity was. It was for those who were cast out.
Yeah.
Jesus literally, like the stories of Jesus talk about him sitting down with the people who were considered the lowest within society. They were the shameful ones, not worthy of even being in religious spaces. And Jesus stood by them and said, these are my children. These are my brothers and sisters. And you will love them and you will cherish them and treat them with respect and dignity. And to say otherwise is to go against the word of God. And I feel as though that's not the totality of what is being taught now.
I would totally agree.
And again, it entirely depends on the minister. It entirely depends on the congregation. There's a lot of different factors. Every place that you go, you're going to get a different interpretation, but then it just goes to show you that religion is imperfect. And so you can, by all means, call yourself a Christian. By all means, congregate with people who share similar beliefs to you. We are naturally collective beings, right? We want to be around people. We want to relate to people. But to do so and then have it as a source of isolation or weaponization, or not having self-autonomy and having your own thoughts and ideas and not having the space to be able to share those thoughts and ideas and to not be beaten down for having different thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, because I think that's a really important point too, this idea of being, beaten down for having different ideas. Like when I look at the concept of religious trauma as a whole, I think that a lot of it tends to kind of gravitate around this line of, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. But I think that we can make it a little bit broader than that. Not to say that there are more people that are broken than have been broken before, but to say that a lot of these people who are probably still on the fence of whether they were traumatized by religion or not, but feel that, even just this idea of like this deep subconscious religious guilt, or this feeling that there is something that's watching over you with your every move, that's almost kind of like this, like twisted Santa Claus, if you will. It's like, are you naughty?
I was literally
nice?
singing that song in my head. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's this realization that we have taken all of these different holy books, at least this is my own personal belief, we've taken all these different holy books and we've made them the Bible truth, so much so that a lot of people have made a lot of money off of it. And yet at the same time, we use words to be able to hurt our neighbor, which goes against the idea of what the biblical text is saying with loving our neighbor. We use those words to hurt our neighbor, but really I think what it is we're using them as a shield to protect ourselves from any backlash for being a shitty human being.
Fear is the biggest... Fear is the biggest excuse for hurting other people. In every aspect, not just in religion. That's in society in general. I think Star Wars was spot on when they said that that fear is the greatest evil, and it is the thing that takes you to the dark side, right? I think that reigns so vehemently true. And it all comes down to how much your church's beliefs are surrounded by the idea of hell, the devil. I have my...
because that's a big part of it.
Yeah, because a big aspect of Christianity is there's this inherent duality where there is God. There's always this feeling of like there's God and then there's the devil, and there's like two sides, and it's obviously much more complex than that. And the upbringing that I had, there was definitely encouragement to think beyond black and white. But when you grow up as a child, black and white thinking is very common because that's
that's part of neurologically. I mean, that's like neurologically how it works.
And when you bring in neurodivergence, you get even more black and white thinking.
Right.
So there's very much this intense rhetoric and ideology, especially what's being, talked about a lot on, for instance, like social media. There's very much a stark contrast between this is heavenly, this is hell, this is devil worship, this is satanic.
That brings up a really interesting point as well. I didn't mean to cut you off, but when we look at social media in regards to religion, I mean, that's a whole other factor, because think about it. Before the televangelist side of things, like you had your small community church, and a lot of it, I think, was surrounding community. It was the idea that we had these hubs with good ideals and values that we could go to on a weekly basis to remember who we were surrounding ourselves with in our community.
And to go off of that, I think that when back in the day, when it was more just individual community-based churches, and maybe there was one, maybe two churches. Like we'd have like a Protestant and like a Catholic church, because there's always been a separation between those. And there always will be. But I feel as though back in those times, it was exactly what you said. It was a bringing together of the community under one collective roof of saying, we are all in this together. And it really and truly was a cultural thing. It was just a part of life. It's what you did. It wasn't just, oh, I'm going here for spiritual purposes. It's, no, this is what you do as a part of this community. This is how I engage with the people around me. And that is massively beneficial. It is so important to have those senses of community. But I feel as though nowadays, because we have other ways of having senses of community, because we have communication through social media, because we're able to meet with people virtually from around the world and find people where we have collective feelings and senses of belongings, that's also separated a lot of people from the church. And a lot of churches are finding that they're having a difficult time getting the younger generations to come.
Right.
And a lot of the younger generations that are joining are people who grew up in the extremism. And so now a lot of what you're seeing online as a result is the extremism, because that's what's being evangelized.
That makes sense.
And I've always thought it was bizarre and strange, the idea. This has never quite sat with me, right? The idea of preach the good word, to go out and share the good word, to share the good news,
Right.
to share the good news of God. And there's always been this feeling of, well, if the good news of God is so good, then why would I need to be the one to share it? Why do I need to go to other people to tell them about this? If this is something that somebody is meant to have, do people not seek out what they're supposed to find? Like, sure, people may not be aware of it, but who isn't aware of it?
Well, I mean,
who
that's
isn't
the
aware?
thing.
Like, people who go on like mission trips to African countries. It's like
that's a whole other can of worms too.
Like there's a ton of layers and layers and layers of fucked upness to that.
Right.
Pardon my French, but there's a lot of layers to that.
Yeah.
And there are definitely sections of Africa where Christianity is very, very powerful, very extreme force. Great. Start to wonder how that came about and how much of that was potential colonization, racism. But
yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of the interesting idea, because I know that there's a lot of individuals in these third world countries that have basically said that, you've got these young white kids who come on mission trips and they build things that we don't need, and they help out, and they really believe that they're doing this good work, but they're not actually asking people what it is that they need. And then they start preaching and throwing these things and shoving this down this person's throat, because it's like, well, God brought us here to help you with things that you didn't need help with, and now you need to help yourself by finding God. And it starts to make you question, is this something where we're really doing meaningful work, or are we just kind of taking a vacation with our first world nature in a way that makes us feel good? And I think it's both, because I've seen both.
Because it always comes about with good intention. I have never talked to somebody who's gone on a mission trip to a third world country, or even to like down the street to help with a mission project. I've never heard of a single person who goes with the intent of saying, I'm going to like force people out of their
to make
belief.
things awful.
I'm like doing this because other people are bad and wrong and meh. Like that's never the intention.
Right.
But there's also the understanding of everybody is an individual human being who gets to decide the choices. We are given free will. We are probably the only creature that exists on the face of this earth that has the level of consciousness and mental processing capabilities as we do, the ability to communicate in the way that we do, to feel emotions in the way that we do, to walk and locomote around in the way that we do. And so because of that, we are complex, and we have consciousness, and we have free will. Every other animal doesn't have free will in the same capacity.
Right.
There are some animals that have the intelligence level of a 9-year-old child, yes, but they don't have free will in the same way, because they're still instinctual creatures. Yeah. We could go into a whole conversation of us still being instinctual creatures and not having free will and all sorts of, that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But within that, I think that the importance in today's day and age is to stop saying, I know what's best for you because God told me. And to start saying, I want to know what's best for you by your inner God telling my inner God what is best. Because I believe that God is within each and every single one of us. I believe that I cannot commune with anybody else's God. I think that everybody has their own personal connection and understanding with God, which is why at the end of yogic practices, they say, Namaste, the light within me sees the light within you.
Right.
That's a very heavy weighted statement, and I don't think it should be said passively at the end of a yoga class taught by a random white lady who's drinking Starbucks.
I would agree.
There's also other layers of complexity within that. But that phrase holds so much weight to it, and I think it's one of the most succinct ways of putting it, that the God within me, the true essence, the true nature of my spirit, of my life, and my connection to divine, sees that within you, and sees that within this plant, and sees that within this camera, and sees that within everything around me. And my goal as a connection to my God is to be as heavenly as possible, to be a good Samaritan, to be a good disciple of God. And to do so is to serve you in the way that you need. Just as it is your job to serve me in the way that I need. Right. And it's a two-way street. And I feel like that two-way street isn't something that is, in conversations that I have had, not talked about.
And that brings up a really interesting point in terms that, they say that there's 3 different things that you're not supposed to talk about with like mixed people. I think it's like there's religion, politics, and I can't remember what the third one is. It might be work or something else.
It could be work, it could be race, it could be like any of the hot topics.
Right. But,
climate change, it could be anything.
Right, but this brings up an interesting point, because if we don't have these conversations, then how are we supposed to learn more about our fellow brothers and sisters? If we don't have these conversations that challenge us in certain ways and challenge our thinking, then do we actually evolve? And it makes me really, really start to think about, when we look at this whole idea of the church perspective in many cases, right? It's like certain things are accepted and certain things are not accepted. And I see this within social media as well, where it's so easy for me to not find anything that conflicts with my ideas or values or anything else. But neurologically, what we understand about that is if we are not being challenged in our thought process, we're not being neuroplastic and we're not growing. And so it makes me start to wonder and question, when you look at the whole idea of namaste, and you look at the immense reverence that's behind that, do we still have that in most of our religion, really and truly? Do we still hold these things to a high enough value that we see them in a pious nature, as opposed to it being something that's just seen kind of superficially? As I go to church on Sunday, or I know you've talked to me before about what you call like the Christmas goers.
Oh, the two-timers.
Yeah, the two-timers. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Hacking Health. Now, if you're someone who's been struggling with trauma or being able to put these pieces together of your life, if you're someone who feels like you're stuck in life and you can't move forward and you just can't seem to make progress on your own, it may be time to hire a professional. I offer free 1-hour trauma resolution calls to anybody who's interested. This is a completely free service, and my goal in this call is to really get you lasting results. In this call, we'll not only talk about some of your goals and where you've had these struggles, but I'll help you to get to the root core of where these problems are and give you step-by-step plans of how we can work together to change that, so that you can overcome your mental health hurdles and really become the person deep down inside that you know that you can be. So if you're ready for your life to change, if you're ready for you to take hold of your life and be in control once and for all, then go ahead and click in the link in the description below and let's set up a free 1-hour trauma resolution call. That way we can work together to form a plan for you to overcome your mental health hurdles once and for all. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you don't miss any of our episodes. Thanks again for watching